The future of the lightweight division is in the hands of Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje, and the winner of next week's title fight determines everything. So what if Paddy Pimblett wins? Let's get into it. We are currently staring down the barrel of two completely different timelines, all decided by the outcome of one fight. Paddy Pimblett versus Justin Gaethje isn't just your regular title fight or your regular interim title fight. It affects both the lightweight and the welterweight division, as well as Ilia Topuria's next move and who the UFC chooses to build around. And I'm gonna just keep it real off the rip, man. Paddy Pimblett does not deserve to be fighting for an interim title. Neither does Justin Gaethje. Justin was threatening to retire if he didn't get his title shot off of beating Rafael Fiziev.
They owe me a championship fight. I'm 3-1. They came to my house, begged me to fight Max Holloway on UFC 300. I consider it an exhibition fight. I don't mean that the loss is not on my record. And then Oliveira's 2-2 in his last fight. Already has a loss to Makhachev, and they bring a brand new guy in, and I get again. So I'm not gonna fight any of these motherfuckers for fun unless they pay me so much more money.
This guy's literally on a one fight win streak, and Paddy Pimblett, this guy hasn't been tested. He has had the easiest path to the title, and if you disagree, man, just look at the records. Honestly, if Arman was involved, I would have been happy for either one of these guys to get that shot, but the fact that Arman Tsarukyan's not even involved in this, it just puts a stain on this entire division. Yes, the fight is exciting and I'm definitely going to watch it, but you just know this sport doesn't go by merit anymore. So what happens if Paddy Pimblett actually wins? This brings me into my first theme, the Paddy timeline. Like I said, man, two different possible outcomes based on this one fight, and if Paddy Pimblett wins this interim title, it's going to be chaos for this division. What do I mean by this? Not only for this lightweight division, but it also sets a bad standard that this guy that had a really easy path to the title is now the UFC champion. We never really got to see this guy get tested by a guy that was dangerous in his prime, the same age as him. Like, let's just look at Paddy's past few opponents, man. They've all been in the later stages of their career, really on that edge of retirement. So any argument regarding rankings of merit just completely collapses, because we've not only had Sean O'Malley get an easy path, but now we've got Paddy Pimblett, where at least Sean O'Malley had to fight Peter Yan in his prime. So as much as us as the fans hate to see these kind of things happening, we're gonna watch regardless. One thing worth mentioning though is that if Paddy does win, this creates insane momentum for the UFC, especially rolling into a new deal with Paramount. This is exactly the outcome that they want. But like I said, man, this isn't the best outcome skill wise, but it's the best outcome for noise. Which brings me into my next theme, the merit versus reality gap. Like I said, man, this fight shouldn't really even exist, but it does, and I've come to terms with it. I'm not overly mad at Justin Gaethje getting a title shot. I'm just mad at the fact that he threatened to retire if he didn't. It made him seem very entitled. But when you look at his resume, man, Justin Gaethje, he's really been tested by the best of the best. Obviously, he's lost a lot of his fights, but if we look at his most recent wins, it's Dustin Poirier and Rafael Fiziev. These two wins alone are so much better than anyone that Paddy Pimblett has beaten, because Justin Gaethje also beat Chandler, but he didn't beat a weathered version of Chandler. And again, he also beat Tony Ferguson, but he didn't beat a completely washed version of Tony Ferguson, where Paddy Pimblett, he got both of those guys in the worst stages of their career. And those are literally his most recent two wins. I would even go as far to say that Rafael Fiziev is a much better win than anyone on Paddy's record at this stage in their career. But honestly, man, if Paddy beats Justin Gaethje, and especially in dominant fashion, I'll go back on this, man. I'll own it. Because even though Justin Gaethje is getting up there in age, like I said, man, his resume and the fact that he just beat Rafael Fiziev, it shows all of us that Paddy is just that good, and the UFC were the ones responsible for giving him these easy matchups. Which brings me into my next theme, why this is actually winnable for Paddy. Like I said, man, Justin Gaethje, even though he's getting up there in age, he is 37 years old, he's still extremely good, but it does play a factor. Even in the lead up to the fight this week, he's openly talked about retiring if he does lose this fight, and also his coach has talked about retirement, which clearly means they know Justin Gaethje is nowhere near the prime of his career. And also one thing that you can tell when fighters start talking like this is they are slightly mentally checked out. That's why I think Justin Gaethje was out there crying for a title shot, because he knew he didn't have the capacity to climb back up the ladder. And for him coming into one of the biggest fights of his career, this is not the mentality you want to be having. To me, that just doesn't scream confidence. It screams a guy that knows he's on his way out, and this is literally his last hope. And one thing I will say about Paddy Pimblett is he's not an extremely technical guy. If anything, he thrives in the chaos. He's got a granite chin. We've seen Justin Gaethje get knocked out. We've never seen Paddy Pimblett get knocked out. And Justin Gaethje's game plan is probably to make this fight a car crash. But like I said, man, Paddy Pimblett's never been known for his extremely high fight IQ or technique. So I do think the more that this fight gets messy, the more that Paddy's confidence will rise, because Justin Gaethje, like I said, man, he's not in the prime of his career. He recently got knocked out. So if you ever had a chance at knocking out Justin Gaethje, it's now. And let's just look at the mental edge of this fight. Justin Gaethje is fighting not to lose, where Paddy is fighting to win. These are two completely different mentalities. Which brings me into my next theme, the UFC's dream outcome. I'm just gonna say what we're all thinking. It's very clear the UFC wants Paddy Pimblett to win this fight, hence why they made this an interim title fight. I think they are just betting on the fact that Justin Gaethje is getting up there in age, and Paddy Pimblett is the younger, fresher guy that hasn't taken anywhere close to the amount of damage that Justin Gaethje has. So they are quite confident that Paddy is going to win this fight, and then they will get Paddy Pimblett versus Ilia Topuria, literally the biggest fight you can make in the sport right now, because this is the fight that the UFC has been quietly steering toward. This beef goes back years at this point, ever since Paddy and Ilia both beefed at a press conference.
When I saw him last time, he got an hand sanitizer bottle bounced off his foot.
I don't understand you or anything. Back in the flouty mouth, like what?
Hand sanitizer, boy!
It's also one of those things where fighters from the UK tend to have extremely loyal fan bases. So we've got one guy, Ilia Topuria, who is a global superstar at this point, but then we've also got Paddy Pimblett, a guy that is from a very small region. But those kind of places, man, is where you get the most die-hard of fans. Look at Conor McGregor's rise. Again, it was that kind of British-Irish fan base, and these guys are just so loyal to their athletes. So this means it will be a huge success for the UFC. Even though they don't do pay-per-views anymore, it still gives them insane leverage for this new deal at Paramount. So like I said, Paddy winning here is not only best case scenario for the UFC, but also for Ilia Topuria. And what do I mean by this? Let's just be real, man. Paddy Pimblett is probably the easiest title defense that Ilia can have in this division. He's much more beatable than all of these other guys aside from Justin Gaethje. I think Ilia Topuria would have an easier time beating Justin Gaethje just because there isn't much of a reach advantage there. It's also the biggest payday that Ilia could get, and also the least riskiest. So Ilia Topuria doesn't want a guy like Arman Tsarukyan, and he wants a guy like Paddy Pimblett where it's low risk, a lot of money, and massive name value. Which brings me into my next theme, Ilia's playbook. Anyone that knows this sport, I think it's very obvious what Ilia's playbook here is. He just wants to speed run GOAT status. And I gotta say, man, he's doing an incredible job at it. Ilia's plan here is very clear. It's to get the title and then defend it once and then move up. We just saw him do this at featherweight where he beat an absolute GOAT of the division who was Volkanovski, and then went on to have one title defense against Max Holloway, and then moved up to the lightweight division, and then again beat an absolute GOAT in Charles Oliveira. And now I guarantee you for a fact, Ilia Topuria will have one title defense against the winner of Justin versus Paddy, and then move up to the welterweight. Especially if it's Paddy Pimblett, because this will be the perfect way to end your lightweight reign. Paddy Pimblett is a massive name. You also have the opportunity to absolutely dominate in your first title defense. It's massive attention for your own name and for your legacy. And one thing we haven't seen Ilia Topuria come up against is a guy that has a very offensive wrestling style. And someone like Arman Tsarukyan, Islam Makhachev, those are the only two real nightmare matchups for him. And Paddy Pimblett doesn't have that kind of offensive wrestling. I would say Paddy has a very similar style to Charles Oliveira, and we just saw how Ilia Topuria absolutely manhandled Charles Oliveira, even when the fight did hit the mat for a brief few moments. One thing that's important to mention as well is when you look at the rest of the top 5 of this division, who else would Ilia even fight? Like I said, man, he's going to fight the winner of either Paddy or Justin Gaethje. Arman Tsarukyan is definitely not getting a title shot, and like I said, Ilia Topuria would not want that risk because Arman's not a massive name, so why would you even put yourself through that when you can fight a guy like Paddy and then move up to fight a guy that's very similar to Arman and Islam Makhachev, but will make you so much more money and will mean a lot more to your legacy. And then the only other two guys in the top 5 is Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira, and Ilia already beat them both. So aside from the winner of this fight, the only other matchup that would make sense for Ilia is Arman Tsarukyan. Which brings me into my next theme, the Dana White privilege.
You got Dana White privilege.
Tony.
Let's be real, man. Paddy Pimblett has had the clearest example of Dana White privilege. This guy had the goldest path to the title. The timing has always been in his favor, with his opponents constantly being in the declining stages of their career. And like I said, even Justin Gaethje is kind of in that same spot. That's why I'm mad he's getting the title shot, man. It should have been Arman Tsarukyan versus Paddy. But one thing I will say about this, if Paddy Pimblett goes out there and beats Justin Gaethje and finishes him faster than both Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway did, that says something about Paddy Pimblett, man. I think a lot of the people, including myself, who kind of doubts Paddy Pimblett and the way that he's gotten to the title shot, we will have absolutely nothing to say, because even though Justin Gaethje is in the later stages of his career, if he can finish him a lot quicker than both Max and Charles, that's extremely impressive, man. Because like I said, we saw Paddy Pimblett go out there and finish Chandler a lot quicker than both Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira did. But again, it's hard to measure how much that is because Paddy is just that good, or just how much damage Chandler had accumulated and how washed he was. But like I said, man, if he goes out there and dominates Justin Gaethje, I do think that narrative of Paddy Pimblett being kind of gifted a title shot will flip overnight. Which brings me into my next theme, the UFC's emergency plan. With Ilia Topuria having a lot of personal stuff going on and having to step away from the sport momentarily, if he does for whatever reason need more time off and won't return by that White House card, the reason they made this an interim title is because they are hoping that if worst case scenario happens and Ilia does need more time off, they will make the interim champion defend his title. And yes, I know we all hate to even hear that because we just saw how the Tom Aspinall situation played out, but this is genuinely the UFC's emergency plan. That's the whole reason they made this an interim title fight. And Paddy Pimblett wouldn't say no to defending the interim title because he gets championship money. Like, you'd kind of be a bit dumb to say no. Not to mention it keeps that spotlight on him, and also, like I said, they're not going to give Arman Tsarukyan the next shot, so it would likely be the winner of Max versus Charles to fight Paddy if he does win the interim title. And like I said, man, I think Max and Charles are both in those later stages of their careers and have taken a lot of damage, so if you're going to have a chance to beat them, it's literally now. And one thing I will mention is the UFC will never strip Ilia, even if he's unable to fight till the end of this year, because they will not risk losing this Ilia versus Paddy Pimblett matchup. They just won't. But they will keep Paddy Pimblett busy and profitable. Which brings me into my next theme, the end of the old guard. Like I just said, man, when you really look at the top 5, top 10 of this lightweight division, this division was the best for the longest time. But let's just look at the top of it, man. Max Holloway, even though he's still extremely good, he is aging and has weathered a lot of damage. Charles Oliveira, same situation, getting up there in age, and he's extremely hittable. And after that Ilia Topuria fight, man, I don't know, his demeanor has completely changed. Justin Gaethje nearing retirement. If he loses this fight, he'll 100% retire. And Arman Tsarukyan, the only guy kind of in that middle ground where he's not old, but he's not super young, he's kind of in his prime and should be fighting for the title, is temporarily iced by the UFC. Meanwhile, Paddy Pimblett is young, he's extremely marketable, and like I said before, man, he's been managed perfectly. So this wouldn't just crown a new contender, it would literally mean the end of an era. We've just seen Dustin Poirier retire, and Justin Gaethje is one of those only other guys left from that Conor Khabib era. So Paddy Pimblett could realistically have a decently good run at title defenses. And looking at the psychology of both fighters coming into this interim title fight, like I said, man, Paddy Pimblett, he's fighting to prove everyone wrong, where Justin Gaethje, he's fighting to prove that he still belongs. And both of these motivations are completely different, man. So if Paddy Pimblett wins here, the UFC won't just have a new champion, they will have their biggest star. And once a door like this gets open, man, I think it sets a bad precedent for the rest of the fighters on the roster when it comes to earning your title shot based on merit. But yeah, man, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you guys do drop a like on this video. Make sure to subscribe as well, man. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.